Hey guys, what's going on? It's Alan here and we're bringing you some Battlefield 3 gameplay at 60 frames per second. Now to watch this in 60 frames per second, you're actually gonna have to play back at 2 times speed, otherwise everything is in slow motion. Now if you can't actually play back in 2 times speed, or it doesn't give you the option, I've linked down below an extension for Chrome that gives you the HTML5 player, and that will actually allow you to play back in 60 frames per second by changing the speed. So please click on that if you can see the change speed option, and you'll be able to watch this video in high quality. So guys, you might be wondering, how did I figure this out? Well, I looked up loads of tutorials because, as you guys may or may not be aware, YouTube are adding 60 frames per second support to YouTube videos soon enough, within the next year I would imagine, right? But if you're like me, you might be impatient and you want to be like, well, I can get 60 frames per second videos now, so why can't I upload them now, you know? And seeing as they have updated their player and most YouTube users have access to the HTML5 player, it actually supports, HTML5 player supports 60 FPS. So what you can do, what I found and what other people have found as well, is you can record your 60 FPS gameplay, right? Then you put it into, like, say, Sony Vegas, which is the tutorial I use, or the video editor that I use, and you can then stretch out the video. So like, say you record a 3-minute clip, you stretch it out in slow motion until it's 6 minutes, so it's exactly double the length of the clip, okay? But you're running it at half the speed. Then you render it out at 60 frames per second and you upload it to YouTube, and then literally when you play it at double the speed, it will then give you double 30 frames per second, which is 60 frames per second. But you have to render it out in 60 frames per second, of course. So I've recorded this video clip in 720p instead of 1080 usually, because that means I can record in 720 and 1080, 720p and 60 frames per second with mirrorless action. Like, mirrorless action says you can record 1080p at 60 frames per second, but in my experience it just downgrades it to 720p anyway, so I've recorded in 720p anyway. And to be honest, when you're recording in 60 frames per second and playing back in 60 frames per second, 720p 60 frames per second looks far better than 1080p 30 frames per second on YouTube currently because the way the compression works, the video looks a lot worse at 1080p because they just compress it heavily, but 60 frames per second looks a lot better, and there are other reasons for that, which I'm not going to get into right here because I'll end up spending ages talking about it. Because I also have, or I'm about to upload a tutorial about how to do this and how to get 60 frames per second. It's a workaround. Now bear in mind, like I said, this will be available shortly for everyone, where you can just upload a 60 frames per second file and it will play back in 60 frames per second. But until such time as that becomes available, this workaround works great. But this video is more of a test than anything to make sure it works well. And another thing, the microphone audio, as you can hear, it's not going to be as good as it would be if you just rendered it at 30 frames per second, because I have to slow down the clip and then speed it up when you're playing it back, so the microphone audio is going to sound a little off, but still good enough that you still want to listen to the video. So keep that in mind, and remember, if you're doing this, when you're stretching out the audio, for the in-game audio, make sure you click properties and lock to stretch, but don't do that on the microphone audio, because then you'll have a really slow motion deep voice. Even when you play it back at double speed, it'll just be a really deep voice, and it's quite entertaining, but not what you want. Anyway guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video at 60 frames per second, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.